We're good to go. We're starting. Jalasi, welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event. It's Centering Indigenous Worldviews in International Heritage. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. As we know, tough times right now. And so it's so nice to make new friends and build new relationships and hear from different perspectives from all over our lovely planet. The central theme for our event is when heritage specialists are thinking about a site or place of special significance and are working towards protecting it, what is important for them to understand about Indigenous worldviews? And so I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of the organizers from the conference, from ICOMOS Canada and the Indigenous Heritage Circle, as well as the awesome team at Archipel Research and Consulting. And I'd also like to thank the funders, Parks Canada, the Government of British Columbia, the Government of Yukon, the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, and EVOC Architecture for their generous support. I am Carrington Christmas. You can call me Carrington, you can call me Christmas, whatever fits your boat. My grandparents are Black Scotian and Mi'kmaq and German, and I'm just really happy to be here. And so before we get started, I'm gonna go over some housekeeping points for all of my friends here. And so because of the way the formatting is when it's, I don't know, shining a light or video conferencing to the website that we're using, we're asking that if you are not speaking to keep your mic muted and your video off just to avoid any feedback issues. And when you are speaking, to just speak that steady rhythm because we have that simultaneous translation that's happening in French and Spanish. And to be attentive to the time that's been allotted to you. And so I will give you a 5-minute heads up right before you're supposed to end. And I'll also give you a 1-minute heads up. So just like look at your chat because I'll just message you and be like, almost done. And then for the audience, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A function on the EventMobi platform. I am going to be extremely multitasked right now, and I'm gonna watch the Zoom, watch our chat, and watch the Q&A. So please ask your questions. We'd love to hear from you. And finally, according to our ways of knowing and being and building relationships, we're going to let you introduce yourselves and tell your own stories. So before each presentation, I'll just pop in and ask you to give a brief introduction, and then you can please get started on your presentation. And so with that, I'm going to pass it off to my lovely friend here, Pamela. So hello, Pamela.
Hello, Karit. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, hakung nga ngo yunga, ikalak du diak miu dao yunga. Hivolit bam piko hilang mikut ilihau tinnik, Kitakmit Heritage Society. Mayor Kunni ikalak du diak mi. So, hello everybody, my name is Hakungak in Inuit Naktun. I'm named after my grandmother's cousin Hakungak, and my given name is Pamela Gross. I am the executive director of the Pikohilangnitgut Ilihautinnik, the Kitakmit Heritage Society, and I'm also the mayor of Cambridge Bay. I went to school in Ottawa for a number of years and studied Inuit studies at Nunavut Siviniksivut. And after that, I went to Carleton University and studied anthropology and minored in Aboriginal studies. I've come back home to Cambridge Bay and brought my education to work for our nonprofit organization, the Pikohilangnitgut Ilihautinnik, and I've been here for 7 years now, serving as the executive director for a majority of that time. And over the course of my time in the job, I've had different board experiences. I was most recently on the Inuit Heritage Trust Board, which is an Inuit public government sector under the Nunavut Agreement and involved with Article 33 of the agreement and working on heritage sites and preserving our cultural heritage, our objects that are in storage. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the organization that I work for and the other experiences, maybe if there's time. So Kwana for having me. Thank you for having me this evening or this afternoon or whatever time it is for you. It's 7 o'clock here, my time. So it's well into the evening, but I'm happy to be with you all. I'm just trying to figure out how to change the, sorry, my slide presentation. I have never shared one of these before, so I'm trying to figure out where to go. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is our area. We're Inuit. We serve 4 communities presently. Ulukaktuk is in the Northwest Territories, Kogaluktuk, Cambridge Bay, and Joe Haven. And what sets us apart is our style of clothing, our language, Inuit Nuktun, and we're a people that has about 6,000 inhabitants today of Inuit, and our dialect Inuit Nuktun is vastly on the decline, and that's in large part to colonization. So Kalakdut Diak is our name of our community, Cambridge Bay. There's about 1,800 people that live here, and I've lived here for a majority of my life and the home of where our organization is. Cambridge Bay was founded during the government era. It's not a traditional place where our people would live due to the location of the community. It would be a spot where our ancestors would go and stop over when they were crossing to go to the good fishing places. But Iqalakdut means fair fishing place in Inuit Nuktun. So the mission of the PIKHS for short is to preserve and renew Inuit knowledge, language, and culture for the benefit of all Inuit. There's about 50,000 Inuit here in Canada. This is the organization's headquarters where we are, and I'm in this space right now. It's our cultural center, museum, library, archives, and we have a special place in the high school. So we're the public library, and due to COVID, we've been closed for a majority of the year, but have been doing a lot of our work online, as most people are familiar with. But this is our beautiful space that we occupy. So we worked on our strategic plan, and these are 4 of our priorities. So Inuit Nuktun language survival is our first priority, and we've been working to coordinate and transfer Inuit Nuktun to ensure that it's not being lost and that we're still preserving our language. And we've been doing this also by our second priority, which is to record our elders, our knowledge keepers, and those that know a lot about our culture and our language, and recording them to pass on. And we have platforms that we're moving to keep that knowledge safe. We also have digital strategies as our priority. So we have all of our content online, and we're celebrating 25 years as an organization. This past Saturday, we had our 25th anniversary, and it was an amazing milestone for us. We're actually the oldest heritage organization. We're older than Nunavut. And we were able to, over time, we're working with Carleton University and the Geomatics and Cartographic Research Center at Carleton to put a lot of our atlases on platforms, and you can find them all on our website. But this is a way for us to also ensure that our research and our way of being and our knowing is being passed on, and that it's accessible for people to look at. And one of the key areas that we've been doing is since 1999 is Inuit archaeology, and I'll talk a little bit about that process. So this is Ochena Jimmy. He is talking about one of our atlases that we have, our oldest research platform, which is the Kitikmeot Place Names Atlas. It can be found on our website, but it was originally intended to preserve the traditional place names of our area, which is key because a lot of our place names hold information on what that place is like, and there's a lot of importance in the name, and we want to ensure that the next generations going forward know the traditions of those names. So on our platform, you can find how to pronounce the name, the location of the name, of course, and what it is, maybe what its significance is, if there was caribou hunting spots or different information that the elders know and shared with us over time. A key aspect, as I said, is recording our elders' traditional knowledge, our language, and with the fast time of colonization, our community has shifted very quickly. A lot of our residents went to residential school, which were in First Nations territories in the Northwest Territories presently today. And a lot of our people, their common language was English. So when they came back home, they had to either relearn our language or have work to retain it, or are learning the language today. So we're working on different objectives to ensure that our language is reawakened and rejuvenated through different programs and mentorship opportunities, but also collecting, archiving, and documenting these beautiful elders and their stories. So we do programming with the youth and teach them how to do the interviewing, how to record and capture these stories of our elders. So they're learning more than one thing. They're learning how to use the technology, but also how to speak in Inuinnaqtun, sometimes hear Inuinnaqtun, and also record and make videos for us to keep forever. So we partnered with different institutions over time, and these particular images that we were looking at are from the Danish National Museum, working on the 5th Thule collection of Knut Rasmussen and him traveling over. This particular individual is from Ummingmakduk, where my namesake is from and where my grandfather's from. And talking about these elders who have passed on from almost 100 years ago. These pictures were taken, and our elders still hold the knowledge of who they are. We can see resemblances in the faces and the family lineage and all those important things when we're thinking of places where people come from, the families that are connected there, and importance of what it's like to be in that spot or how to get there navigating wise, when to go fishing, when not to, the rituals on what you do when you catch fish, so many different interchangeable things that we record and preserve and pass on to the next generations. So as I said, we record our elders, but we also bring them on the land, and this is a photo of two of my namesake sisters who are from Kingauk, which is called Bathurst Inlet, and it's to the south of Cambridge Bay, a really warm and beautiful spot, and where our ancestors have lived for thousands of years, and a place where we're focusing our archaeology on these days with Max Friesen of the University of Toronto. So we hire locals, work with guides, experts, people who are knowledgeable of the landscape of the area. They have a lot of hunting stories or know stories from their parents or talking to elders, and they're the real knowledge keepers today, working with the elders. There's been a lot of things that we work on, significance, bringing our elders out to these spots. They tell us sometimes that these spots are no longer visible because we're not using them anymore. So in this particular area, Kringauk, there's a lot of willow and a lot of brush that has formed over the years, and that's in part due with climate change. And the elders talk about that um, as something it's hard to see them today with you have to do a little bit more searching. But for instance, the year before, we could have overlooked this spot, but we had to go in and really hunt around and look for some of these archaeology spots. So our partnership with the University of Toronto, working with um, Dr. Max Friesen since 1999, has led us to be heritage preservers and learn about our archaeology, our history, have our younger generations working out in the field, learning about our history, that tangible hands-on knowledge and being able to transfer it into the future generations is very key. So this is a large um, tent ring here that was excavated a couple summers ago. And we're working on drone footage and aerial surveys and also climate change and adaptability and preserving these spots that are close to eroding places is all part of our research on this project. So this is Iqaluit, which I was fortunate to go to in the last year of working at Iqaluit. It's also a place where my mom was born, and it's a place, Cambridge Bay is well known for our Arctic char, our Iqaluit, and this is a spot where we still go today, and a lot of our fish is harvested and sent internationally. So if you've ever had fish from Cambridge Bay, a large part of that is coming from this area. And that area is always known for caribou migration and char, and one of the best places in the Canadian Arctic for sure to harvest char. And doing archaeological excavation, as I said, doing the hands-on work is so fascinating, but also being a part of research and on, Arctic archaeology has really been a fascinating time personally, but also for our organization to be a part of larger research projects, to work with universities and people who want to work with us is something we always enjoy doing. As I said before, we put a lot of our information online with the Carleton University platforms, and we do a lot of engagement with both the youth and the elders. And we're very fortunate to have that great interaction. Our elders learn from, the youth, but also the youth learn from the elders. And in this particular spot, we were uploading new place names from that our elders are sharing. So another important piece to cultural heritage and talking with elders is working with museums, and a lot of the collections are in various locations across the world. And our organization has worked with various museums in Canada and internationally to ensure that our Inuit knowledge is incorporated into these museum collections. We're working on tagging objects and sharing what information we know from our elders and having that preserved as well. And bringing these objects home, and these particular pieces came back home on rotation from the Canadian Museum of History, and we exchanged them for other objects that we've had on display for 10 years. So when we're doing this, we have important pieces, our translation. A lot of our elders are unilingual and vice versa. Today, our youth, a lot of us are learning the language, and we have key people who are our bridge, as we like to say. So this particular photo, we have Angulalekak, her name is Emily, and I'm actually in Inuinnaqtun classes this week, which is a great opportunity and a really great thing to be immersed in an organization where a majority of our staff are Inuit, and we have mostly elders actually that work here. And if this call was earlier, you might have seen a couple of them here working with us. And that's one thing that we're very fortunate about, is that there are knowledge keepers and our guidance, but also we speak to them daily and we're able to ask them questions. A lot of people have questions for us, and we go to them for their advice and to get back information. And these particular pieces are a particular garment that are used for drum dancing, and it's an art form that's been lost in our community over time, and we're working to ensure that it's not lost. But that's happened in several instances in our organization, where we're working to capture these very important pieces to our culture and document them, photograph them, record our elders, and actually do the hands-on knowledge to ensure that these pieces and this way of life is not forgotten. So I look forward to being able to make these drum dance shoes and to have our community, and not only Cambridge Bay, but the other Inuit communities, learn how to make these objects. So we had a special celebration when we were looking at some of the objects, and this is a kulluk here, the big stone lamp, which was a vital necessity. And we don't have a way of calling people great aunt or anything, but in today's way, in Western way, you would say a lot of these ladies are my great aunts, but actually they're different. They hold different value to me as grannies, as namesake sisters, and so forth, and also co-workers. So, and also board members of our organization. So we have a lot of fortunate opportunity. This particular kudluk was donated to our organization a few years back, and has about 10 generations from the time that it was made until present day today, of people that is connected to this object here. And it's been a very beautiful thing to have in our center. As I said, we've partnered with the Danish National Museum, and we've taken our elders over there, documenting them. And this is Pihuak, who's also my granny, but my great aunt, and looked at their objects in their collection from the Fifth Thule expedition. And it's so intricate and so amazing to see. Our people are called the Kilohitomute, and it translates to the people of the tiny stitches. And when you look at these objects, you can really see the detail and the immaculate stitching that goes behind making these garments. We've also worked to share our story in different ways, and we were fortunate to be an inaugural exhibit opener, Inuinnaujugut, which means we are Inuinnait, and we showed a lot of our objects that we borrowed from the Canadian Museum of History, but we also had objects that we brought down, and everyone here has created an object that was on display, and we shared our story. And I think it's really important to have that, and a key priority is that we have our language first and foremost when we're creating anything, and speaking to people. And I know I could be rambling on, but I do want to stress the importance of how important it is right now for us as a people to capture the knowledge of our elders, who are very much the last people who lived 100% more than a full year of life out on the land, and know what our ancestors went through. But they're working and interpreting and telling us what it was like, and we're the knowledge holders that have to continue to pass that on. And intrinsic is that in that is our language, Inuinnaqtun, and we have to ensure that we're passing on the language, because that holds our worldview, our way of life, our ancestors, thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and wisdom that we have to pass on about these different places, about what these objects are, how to make them, what you do, how you harvest them, when you harvest them, what part of the animal, and so on, so forth. So when thinking of heritage and the significance of sites, it's very key and important to work with our elders and share that information, and have the right people. Ask the elders first which elders would be good to talk to, because they all have different traits and knowledge sets, and when you start speaking to them, they'll tell you who would be good to talk to. And an elder, as they say, doesn't just become an elder at the age of 65. They become an elder with their knowledge and their wisdom and their understanding of life. So for us, that's been key. It's been priority, and they're highly respected individuals. We pay them very well, we feed them well, and I don't know who's out there, but thank you for listening to me, and Quanaquatit, have a good evening. I'll share with our website, Quana.
Oh, well, and thank you so much, Pamela. Your words were so important. And I loved when you said our way of life, not forgotten, and ensuring that it's passed down. So thank you so much for sharing, and appreciate the work that you're doing. It's so very, very important. And so now I'm going to ask that you mute yourself and please turn off your camera. And I'm going to ask my friends Dennis and Aaron to turn on your cameras and your mics and to share your stories.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Dennis Rose. I'm a Gunditj Mara traditional owner from southeastern Australia, the Gunditj Mara community, and I work with our traditional owner organisation. I'm a program manager. I've been involved in land and cultural heritage management for in excess of 40 years. Erin?
And I'm I'm Erin Rose. I am also Gunditj Mara traditional owner, and I work as the Budj-Bim World Heritage Executive Officer at Gunditj Mering here. So we oversee the cultural landscape here that recently received World Heritage status for its cultural values. I have only recently started in this role around 5 months ago, so I'm relatively new, still getting my head around things. But yeah, I have been working on developing some of the work further around its protection and management. Were you going to add something?
No, you can download the PowerPoint presentation, thanks.
All right. Okay, can we see that?
Yep.
That's good.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much for the invitation to present today. And I'd like to thank you for having us. Also to Pamela, thank you for your presentation. I do note that there are quite a lot of similarities in some of the issues that we deal with here in Australia. Some very similar issues. In fact, we'll see some of our stone buildings that look very remarkably similar shape as well. I'm going to talk today about the Budge Bim, and myself and Erin are going to talk today about the Budge Bim cultural landscape. It was inscribed on the World Heritage List in July 2009. Go to the next slide, please, Erin. Just a map to show where we're situated, southeast Australia, down towards the coast, and we around about 350 kilometres west of Melbourne, for those who may know the area. It has been a long journey for World Heritage. It was first discussed back in 1989. And I think importantly, I've seen a copy of the brief that went to, I think, the state government minister. But importantly, it said Lake Tayrak or Lake Condah certainly has a potential to be a World Heritage Site. But whatever happens or however it goes, you must include, you must have the approval of the Gunditjmara people. I think that was really important, even back then in 1989, that it was recognised that we had a primary role in the development of any potential World Heritage proposal. In 2002, we formally declared World Heritage listing as one of our objectives of what we call Lake Condah Sustainable Development Plan. We identified World Heritage as a possibility. I think at that stage, we weren't really sure what the World Heritage system actually meant, what the process was. Certainly, I know that being involved back then, had no idea, never heard, I don't think, I've never heard of outstanding universal value. But over the years, we continued with that aim of pursuing a World Heritage nomination. We were never sure whether we'd measure up or not. But we always thought that it would be a good journey to pursue. So over the next 13 or so years, we did a lot of research and also lobbying, working with governments, working with agencies, working with non-government organisations, the local farmer, agricultural organisations, field naturalists, a whole range of partners garnering support for our World Heritage nomination. In 2017, after 15 years, the Australian government finally listed us on the Australia's World Heritage tentative list. Then we had a busy year putting together a World Heritage nomination, which we submitted in 2018, and 2019, as I mentioned earlier, we were inscribed on the World Heritage list. Next one, thanks, Sarah. Next slide. On the left there, you can see the Budge Bim cultural landscape World Heritage nomination. It was a document of about 230 pages. Also attached to it were a number of our plans of management, our strategic plans. But it was a very important document, and it was a culmination of many years of collaborative work with various agencies, research institutions, and government agencies and other interested parties. On the right in that picture is at the World Heritage Committee in Baku in Azerbaijan in July 2019. That's when the gavel went down to announce that we were on the World Heritage list. It was a truly remarkable day, the end of a long journey, and also the beginning of another journey, I suppose. It's great to receive World Heritage inscription. I think I give a speech at the committee meeting, and my words were really this is a recognition of what our ancestors, what our Gunditjmara ancestors constructed more than 6,000 years ago. And it's really a truly remarkable system, and it sort of highlights the ingenuity of Gunditjmara people. Next slide, thanks, Erin. Here's a few images of Budgebim. Budgebim actually means big head. It's a volcanic eruption that erupted around about 37,000 years ago, and from the lava flow, our ancestors constructed quite a number of series of channels, of dams, of weirs. They engineered an aquaculture system, and you can see the writing there. The Budgebim cultural landscape contains one of the world's most extensive and oldest aquaculture systems that are in existence today. Next slide, please, Erin. You can see the aerial photo here. In the middle, running horizontally, is a channel that connects the lake, which is on the right-hand side, and there are a number of sinkholes, water holes on the left-hand side. The channel connects with those. This is one of around about 70, in excess of 70 individual systems that are around the edge of the lake. The lake, we're looking at the southwestern end of it, but right around that bottom southern section, there are in excess of 70 individual channels and weirs. You look very closely, Erin, if you can get that across the middle of that channel, there's a line there which was a weir that once the water filled up, the eels and other fish that swam in there, it was blocked off and the eels were farmed. Hence, one of the world's oldest aquaculture systems. It was a system that our ancestors farmed fish. It was a labour-intensive but resource-rich area. Next one, thanks, Erin. Most importantly, we still have people connected to country. We have, over the last few years, the last 35 years, we've systematically gained land. We own around about 3,000 hectares of land now, and it's all part of the World Heritage Area. We also have a co-management arrangement of the Budgebim National Park, where we have a majority of Gunditjmara people on the board. But importantly, we're still there today. And I think that the stories, as Pamela mentioned, they've been fractured, some have been lost, some are not quite known these days. We're putting the story back together again. And I think being out on country, to have country back, has been really important. In 1984, as a traditional owner group, we had a management control of about 2 hectares of land, which was the Lake Condah Mission Cemetery, the Aboriginal Mission Cemetery. Today we have management control in around about 10,000 hectares of land. So we have a cultural responsibility to get back out on country and look after country, but also we need to get out and enjoy it. Next one, thanks, Erin. Again, our outstanding universal value includes evidence of one of the world's oldest known aquaculture systems. Gunditjmara people constructed an extensive and technologically sophisticated aquaculture system on the Budgebim lava flow. Next slide, thanks, Erin. Here's what we call the Muldoons aquaculture system. This is the site that was excavated in 2008. You can see the archaeologist up on the ladder on the left. In the middle, between in the channel in the middle, you can see, you may be able to see the excavation pit. This is where we got the scientifically accepted date of 6,600 years. This aquaculture system was first constructed 6,600 years ago. It was built upon about 800 years ago as water levels rose, and built upon again about 300 years ago. So again, that's continuing connection to country, and that really shaped the form of that science really shaped the form of our World Heritage nomination. I'm sure that we would have had a World Heritage nomination, regardless of whether we had that scientific evidence, but it may have taken a different shape and form. Next one, thanks, Erin. We had an executive summary. We had our nomination peer reviewed, our tentative list nomination and a comparative analysis. The words exemplary, international significance, suitable for World Heritage nomination, criteria strongly justified. We had a very good case for World Heritage inscription. We did have a few obstacles with the federal government in Australia. We, by and large, had really good support, but the federal government weren't quite as helpful as they could have been. Sorry, I thought that was turned off. If we go to the next one, thanks, Erin. Here's a good example of the federal minister, the foreign minister, in 2014 in front of a very large audience of conservation people, said we have 19 precious World Heritage sites, which is remarkable for a nation without millennia-old built history. There you have a quote from myself a couple of years later. Budge Bim lava flow contains excellent examples of the world's oldest aquaculture system, at least 6,600 years old. So even our leading ministers didn't actually accept or understand the complexity of life out on country. This one, thanks, Erin. This is at the World Heritage Committee at the announcement. I've got the heading up there, improving country. And I think that's a really important part of our process. We don't want to just maintain or manage what we have. We want to improve the health of country. I think that's an aim of ourselves as a traditional owner group, but also of the broader community around here. I think that they value and understand the value of Budge Bim, and we all are working together to improve the health of country. Again, there's some quotes from a couple of countries there. A nomination that has it all, from Hungary, an example of a perfectly managed site, an excellent and effective management system in place. We certainly enjoyed the day of the inscription, I think, but I think the reality sunk in afterwards that we still had a lot of work in front of us, and we were under the spotlight as a land management organisation to make sure that our management again goes towards that aim of improving the health of country. Over to you, Erin.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to the management plan. So we've got quite a comprehensive management and protection system in place for the Budge Bim cultural landscape. We've got three management plans, which two we refer to as the IPA, the Indigenous Protected Area Plan of Management, and also we've got a more of a regional focused plan, which still provides or provides that strategic protection, which we refer to as Nukyungudij Nukyumara. So the plans aim to incorporate management strategies and actions to protect country and look after country. And it informs best practice, incorporating both traditional and contemporary management. And we also, it encourages a lot of community participation in caring for country with our Gunditjmara members. So making sure we've got the voices of Gunditjmara people throughout our practices ongoing. And the plans also provide supports and mechanisms in place to fulfil the requirements of the World Heritage as a World Heritage site. So I guess it's quite a comprehensive, well, the documents, all three documents are quite comprehensive. They align with one another and will also form part of the strategic management framework which we're required to develop to support the Budge Bim cultural landscape as a World Heritage site. So yeah, it's really a useful tool for us to see how we're going with looking after country and making sure we're protecting the values of the landscape. I don't know if I missed anything else.
That's good. That's getting towards the end of it. I think I'd just like to summarise a few points, particularly for heritage practitioners. I think that one thing that always need to keep in mind and make sure of that if you're dealing with Indigenous groups in terms of heritage, include them, involve them, make sure they're equal partners at the beginning or close enough to the beginning. I think that's just so important across a range of matters. So really to include people from the beginning. We've seen from experience with our processes, with the World Heritage Project, but also other things we're involved in, that include us at the start, otherwise it doesn't work that well. And there'll be obstacles along the way. Excuse me for 1 minute.
We have less than 1 minute left.
Yep, I'm just about finished. We are also using technology, LiDAR, to uncover or rediscover sites that may not be recorded as yet. I think just to finish off, the photo there, the image there, it's about community control. I believe, and I'm sure that we maintain control of the World Heritage process right the way through. We were pushing it along. We were controlling it. We worked with some great people putting the nomination together. They incorporated our aspirations into what is a fairly technical requirement for the World Heritage. But you can see there again a mixture of people, elders, youth. We spent a lot of time and effort into putting resources into our youth, reintroducing language, cultural practice, access to country. All of that is really important. Look, I think time's gone, so thanks very much. Thank you, Erin, and thank you, Carrington.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Those photos are absolutely beautiful. I'm so thankful that you shared that with us. And I really appreciate when you said that we need to get out and enjoy it, because that's also really important, right? Is that we have that relationship and connection. So thank you, Walalan, for your sharing. And so now I ask you, friends, if you could please mute yourself and turn off your cameras. And I call up my other friend, Shaw, to share your stories and to introduce yourself.
Ali, and hello. My name is Sha Ongalung. I am speaking from Honolulu. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, and my family is from the Republic of Palau. So my professional background is a little bit different from a lot of the speakers. I do media work. I'm an artist, a designer, multimedia content producer, speaker, consultant. And so what I'll actually be doing today is telling you the story of an American child and how her Indigenous worldview was formed thanks to the wonders of good parenting and a decision to make sure that she did have an Indigenous point of view and understanding of the world as she grew up. So I'm gonna go ahead and share screen. And let's see. Okay, so this is, in theory, is the story of this child. However, it's more the story of that woman there on the left and that man there in the center, and how they created a child who was born away from their native homeland, but still loved her culture so much that she put it on herself, made a career out of presenting it to people. It basically runs her life. That's me. So My parents had me in Portland, Oregon, and one of their biggest concerns was that being as far away from the Republic of Palau as I would become most certainly an American. And their biggest fear was that I wouldn't know my culture, I wouldn't know my heritage, I wouldn't connect with my roots. And it worried them so much that I was actually, for a time, the only Palauan born and raised outside of the Republic of Palau to speak our language. Then my sister was born, and from what I've heard, more and more Palauans are choosing to teach their children the language outside of Palau, which obviously is very important. I did not step foot in the Republic of Palau until I was 28 years old. However, I was fortunate enough to be brought up with stories and with relatives who would visit, and with videotapes and with music and with books. And so I was connected to my culture. I was connected to it so much that when I moved to Hawaii and saw the anti-Micronesian sentiment, Micronesian in this case referring to people from Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, mainly, I started talking about it online, and it became an issue that was discussed. It was already being discussed here in Hawaii, but it pushed it more so that we had to dialogue about it. And it presented me with the opportunity to go and talk about my heritage and my culture and my people's history at Mauna Kea. This is Palau. Palau is probably best known for the Rock Islands. It is a World Heritage Site. It is also known for our jellyfish that people come to Palau to swim with because they don't sting. A lot of people have seen the Rock Island Arch. It's a popular photo spot. We're really a scuba diver's paradise, a snorkeler's paradise. That's what we tend to be known for. Also, our traditional men's meeting houses, which obviously they're beautiful. They are made by one of the men's groups from where my father's from. More rock islands, more beaches, very beautiful. And so in 2011, I got on a plane and decided I needed to see where I was from. And I took pictures of these specific trees because these are the next generation of trees from the ones my dad planted when he was a child across the street from his house. I grew up hearing stories about these specific trees. He told me how tall they were when he left, and I had to go. This was the first, even though I had arrived at the airport, I had checked into a hotel, I had been in Palau for not quite a week. I did not process that I was in Palau until I saw these trees. I had seen them in photos, I had heard about them, and this is what let me know that I was home. I was connecting with something. And this is also in my father's home state. It's where he used to fish. It's much more modern now than he remembers, but I needed to go and see the places that I heard about. I needed to go and stand there and try to understand what it felt like to be a Palauan in Palau. This is the state capital, state capital where my father's from. These aren't sacred sites or World Heritage sites, but these are the sites that I heard about when I was growing up. These are the sites that I went to understand where my parents came from, but also to feel connected to this place. Because truth be told, I was an American kid who knew the language, but hadn't lived the culture necessarily. This is the symbol on the flag for my father's home state of Malgilk. I have been drawing this little bird on scrap paper, school notes, notebooks, journals as far back as I can remember, I automatically associate it with my father. But that was the first time I had seen it. And that was the first time I felt like I understood who my dad was. This is a road in the same state, and I have pictures of the same road dating back to the 1950s. Over time, it's changed. There's power lines, it's paved. But all of these things, the bird, the beach, just even this road, as plain as it may be, are all parts of what formed my understanding of who I was, who my parents are, who my ancestors are. This is the meeting house for my father's village, or hamlet. It doesn't look like our traditional meeting houses. And so one of the things that I had to try wrapping my head around was that my family had left in 1975. I was born in the States in 1983. They hadn't returned since then. And so seeing a modern meeting house that didn't look like those beautiful traditional bai, as we'd seen earlier, on one hand is exciting to see things moving forward and knowing in a typhoon, it's less likely to be damaged, but also seeing how we've progressed so far that I would never see this building and look at it and say, oh, that is obviously a meeting house. But fishing is still a way of life. And I had to go and spend a couple of hours looking at the fishing nets and trying to understand how they worked and thinking about the stories of my dad having to help repair them with my grandfather. And this is the house. This is the site of the house where my father grew up. This was the first time I had ever been to his home. That was my grandfather. And though it's not a heritage site, a World Heritage Site, though it's not anything you would find on a map or in a tourist book, this was probably the most exciting place in all of Palau for me. It's an old house. It has aluminum for walls, but everything I learned about my father's upbringing, which included learning about history, learning about spirituality, learning about manners, and learning about respect, was based out of this home. And so being able to be in it, being able to stay there with my grandparents was obviously crucial to forming my Indigenous worldview. And even though I had grown up with the stories my parents had told me and the videos, watching videos of these places, but it wasn't until I saw it and felt it and connected with it that, in a sense, I could feel that I was Palauan. Even something like sitting on a floor allowed me to feel more Palauan. And so, yeah, cows. Basically, it's me wandering through Palau as a 28-year-old, seeing a parade of cultures and having it start out with Palauan students was one of the most amazing things, only because obviously I'd never seen anything like it. It was beautiful. At the same time, it was the first time in my life that I had ever been part of a majority. And so that was an opportunity for me to understand what it meant to be part of the majority, part of the in crowd, what it was like to blend in. And that was a very different experience as well. And I think that played a significant role in how my worldview changed. Mundane things. As much as there are sacred sites, as much as there are beautiful things in Palau, nothing really beats the mundane things. Because at least for me, my worldview, my Indigenous worldview, my perspective, my understanding of who I am goes beyond just what's sacred to other people. It's understanding that every little thing, however mundane, however simple, however strange it may be, is what forms me. It informs my art. It helps me understand that issues that we deal with globally are all connected. And I don't really know what lays ahead, but I know that wherever I'm going, whatever decisions I make, they will be informed by something that was as simple as sitting on a floor and eating with my grandfather.
That was incredible. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. You shared such beautiful photos. I felt a little bit of tears in my eyes when you shared the photos of the trees. I'm like, those are trees. This is so beautiful.
I love those trees.
Yeah, no, you know what? Thank you for really showing, the importance of stories and, not just, it's about hearing the story, but also connecting and like going into that story. And so
Yes.
appreciate you sharing a bit of your story with us.
Thank you.
Olalan, for the beautiful photos. And so now I ask you to turn off your mic and camera. Olalan, so much, my friend. And I ask my friends here, Makari and Xavier, to come and share your stories and introduce yourselves. Olalan.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just give a quick shortened version of the karakia to start us off. Tui i runga, tui i raro, tui i waho, tui i roto, tui i te here tangata, tihei mauri ora. So just the binding, weaving together the peoples of this world with the call of the tui bird. Kia ora koutou, greetings to you all. Especially, of course, to our hosts in Canada, and there have been, and I'd like to thank the various elders who have given us karakia over the prayers over the to introduce us over the last few days, and of course to Pamela and the Inuit people, and Dennis and Aaron from Closer Gunditjmara, and Shah for her sharing about her experience going back to Palau. Thank you so much. So my name is Xavier Ford. I'm from the tribes of Ngāti Raukawa and Ngāti Toa and Ngāti Huia here in mainly the northern island of our country, New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I'll pass over to my colleague to introduce yourself, Makari.
Kia ora tātou katoa, ko Makari Rakahike tākou ingoa, I te taha tōku pāpā kuia no te wharetapu o Ngāpuhi, I te taha tōku māmā kuia no te puaha o Waikato, engari kua te Poarahi me kaurunga koe mō Pauheretanga. So my name's Makari Rakahike, depending on who you ask. So I have a sort of name that bridges the divide, but essentially in different speak, it means shining one. My father is from the tip of our far northern island, and which we call Te Ika, and my mother is from our Pourangatira that are based in Waikato Tainui. So between us, we have quite a good spread up in Te Ika through the country. Kia ora, Xavier.
Oh, yep. And so the both of us happen to be colleagues at the National Agency for Heritage here in New Zealand, conveniently called Heritage New Zealand, but Pauheretanga as well, which means to bind together the taonga of the country in the reo in Māori. Yes, I'm also a part of the Commonwealth New Zealand, and market is also associated with probably what would you say, NZ archaeology, Makari?
Yeah, so Xavier and I are just going to have a conversation about a few things that are quite topical. I come from a background where I was trained, so I come from a background where I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and with our older generation, and then it was noticed that I had quite an affinity with some of our older narratives and what we call our taonga, or some of the treasures that were left behind by our peoples. And so that's where I gravitated towards. I've always had a fascination with archaeology, so I was trained as one of our first archaeologists, and wanted to bridge the divide between what an archaeologist appeared to do and what they should be doing, and create a new kind of approach to how we look after some of these things that are as important to us as breathing.
Yeah, I suppose so. We're trying to keep it real today. We're bringing the tone right down, quite raw in terms of from a perspective of professionals. So in other words, we're both heritage professionals, but we're also Indigenous peoples, aka bros and sisters. And so what we were going to talk about, I've put the first points of our slides in your chat, and there's about a 20-second delay, so I think it will be coming up just about now. Actually, I'll just put the next ones on there as well. There we go. And one of our points, which Market has already just alluded to, is one of our hopes is and ways of improving things in our country is to have professionals over professionals, that we hope for our own people to become the recognized experts. So Market is an example of that. She was tagged by whānau to take that archaeologist expertise and become the expert, but from an Indigenous perspective. And the other, I think it was Kelly Market, you remember her last name, from Hawaii, who was talking to us about their developing a whole company based on their own heritage custodianship as kaitiaki, as guardians, and that combined all of these heritage professions and brought them under one label of tribal guardian, and created this new profession. So that's another example. There's also these iwi monitors workshops that you run, Market. I just thought you might want to talk about that.
Yeah, so we have quite a good relationship with different places and people around the motu. I've been quite heavily involved with different heritage things, mostly with the World Archaeological Congress, because archaeology is an ancestral footprint is where I gravitated towards. And these are some of the forums that I met with in terms of Kelly Ueoka and Lemomi Wheeler and the Huia Laupapa from Hawaii. So massive shout out to everyone in Hawaii and everyone around the world, including our brothers and sisters in Australia, who we have quite a good relationship with too. So when we talk about professionals over professionals, there tends to be quite the emphasis on letters and people who have letters after their names. Unfortunately, there's also an emphasis on what we call the Beijing or the Beige Brigade, which tend to be non-Indigenous, non-native voices, which make their way and filter through and become the gatekeepers in not only archaeology, but other disciplines where power and control is concentrated. So for us, basically growing the capacity within our people, within our tribes and our groups, so that they can take over and basically take back their narratives, essentially, and take back their stories.
Yeah, so the title of our talk is Take the Power Back in Heritage Practice. Don't stand on a silent platform, fight the war, the norm. You might recognise the group that comes from, and also with links to the Zapatista movement, I suppose, and written by a grandson of the Mexican Revolution. So, second point is the use and abuse of heritage practice to Indigenous ends. So one of the things that there's a whole heritage profession that's developed and all sorts of laws and so on. One of the things we seek to do in our work is actually to use any method possible to reinsert our ancestral footprint. So one of the ways we do this is using colonial town planning. And Margaret, you can say how that works.
So basically for us and our small team that we do have, we use not only our technical skills, so we call it TNT, technical skills and tikanga, our native modes, our cultural modes, to teach other catalysts on how to be catalysts and how to affect change in certain ways. And one of the ways that we do this is not only we invert things and we encourage the inversion of people to operate in their own sectors to create that change. And so we focus on ancestral footprint, we get them thinking about the law of reciprocity, and we get other professionals that interact with these people to think about the law of reciprocity. Basically, the premise that if you were going to take something back, and archaeology and other heritage processes are essentially the eradication of someone's ancestral footprint, someone's tupuna and their ancestors, then that cultural footprint must be put back. You must give back. And that extends from town planners. So we use that as a thumb of rule to get the planners that are planning these beautiful new places of redeveloping landscapes, cultural landscapes, to find some way to reinsert that in the buildings, in the landscape, and what's the structures and the artwork, so that that footprint is never lost, because our footprints, our artworks are all memorials that stand as testament to those who have gone before us. So we honour that, and we, in our little team, in some way fight to ensure that that is maintained and that the status quo of homogenising everything and making it beige does not continue.
So I took the lyrics from that our Australian friends will recognise. The time has come to say fair's fair, to pay the rent, yes, to pay your share. Speaking to our heritage practitioners and all the local government organisations that govern the land here in Aotearoa. And one of the options there in terms of reciprocity and accountability is making sure that any information that's taken, for example, in archaeological reports, gets given back to the communities. And giving it back when it comes to the land is also an option that we promote within our own organisation that would otherwise not be considered. You can give back a heritage place to tribes under the right circumstances and with a budget, as we were discussing this morning, or else, and it might be the best, most culturally appropriate option for that place. Just skipping ahead because time's short for us. Iwi over Kiwi. That there was a slogan in an election recently where they put together iwi and kiwi as to show this distinction between iwi, which means tribe, and kiwi, which is kind of like the whole country. And it was a right-wing idea to say they're dividing the country and they're taking over. We say sure. So we need to emphasize Indigenous distinctiveness over the nationalistic dilution. We're talking about this morning about Western diffusionism of all that is radical about our identities here as the different tribes in Aotearoa. And so one of the powerful things that I think we still have to learn and use from our friends overseas, particularly in the Northern Americas, is the use of the terms like First Nations, because it's a really powerful way of demarcating from what we have here in this country, which is a strong drive to having one nation. We are all one people. And so the tribes are a component of that one nation, as opposed to this idea about multiple nations, and that's kind of at a first principle, but it really infects, I found, heritage practice, and also and including our own organisations, government organisations. And finally, the old speak and over new speak. We've talked about reappropriating heritage terminology and putting the lawyers out of work. As someone was discussing this morning, a lawyer, Catherine, that Indigenous heritage should have Indigenous terminology so that it refers back to the people of the land for its interpretation, as well as that initial designation of this place being heritage and so on. And so by doing that, and we're lucky enough in this country that we have a couple examples in legislation, we get to empower the custodians of these places, rather than mediating what Indigenous peoples feel about their places through heritage speak, like significant statements, where we're saying we're the experts, we're assessing this place, and in terms of this very technological significance or archaeological significance, and so mediating, because then we hold the knowledge about those places now, because we know what they're significant for, because we've defined that and helped to define that. And instead of that, have these definitions where we use terms like wai tupuna, an ancestral place, and so that we can then take over when people are concerned about what this means. We even have it in legislation that it's an ancestral place, and so that means it's because these Māoris somewhere, this tribe thinks that it belongs to their ancestors. That's why it's that place. That's why it's of heritage significance. So if you want to find out about it, don't read the significance statement. Go and ask them. What do they think about it, and what are their aspirations for that place? Yeah, and anything else along those lines, Makere? We've got a minute, apparently.
Okay, just three things. There is a lack of willingness to acknowledge that in our country, our different peoples have their own signature. They develop differently. They've got different dialects, different cultural material, a different material record. There's quite a range of diversity out there. That's not acknowledged. Second thing that is not acknowledged is that there are a lot of antiquated systems. We have everything that we need that is enshrined in legislation and different processes and frameworks that allow the transition of power from the Crown, from the government, from territorial land authorities to iwi hapu, so back to the people, and yet they're never enacted. A real conversation needs to start as to why. We also don't have a professional body of heritage practitioners in Aotearoa New Zealand, and it's 2021. So people have to stop with the bullshit and have a real conversation at NZAA conferences and archaeology conferences, at museum conferences and other places, and start a real conversation about how far we haven't come in 2021 and why we still have the Beige Brigade sitting around the table making decisions that affect our peoples, our tribes, who in their own way are protecting sites of significance. And our own people also have to pick up the wero and have to acknowledge that tikanga changes. There are differing views. We all don't agree on one push forward, and that there's protection, and then there's moving into the future, but with progression. Can we all leave it at that and pass it back to Carrington?
Nice one, Makere. So that talk was entirely inspired, and the approach to it was entirely inspired by Makere and her approach to things, which is an inspiration for me and for all of us. Ngā mihi te tuahine. Thank you very much.
Well, Lalik, thank you so much. I love how you approached it. I think the things you're saying are so important. I'm really crying at Beige Brigade. And I really loved when you said ancestral footprint and the law of reciprocity. And we have those teachings here as well, that importance of giving back and not just taking. And so such amazing insights. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And so now we have a couple of questions. We don't have a lot of time yet left, but there are some questions that were asked to each of everyone who has presented. And so I'm going to post it in the chat for folks to give you some time to think of your responses. But starting off with Dennis and Rose, the question here says, it was mentioned that it was important to include community from the beginning of management plans. What are your supports or recruitment processes for this? And do you think it's because there is a long-standing relationship between the heritage parties and the community members, or the other means?
Yeah, look, we certainly have good long-standing partnerships with a number of agencies, our National Parks Agency, our Environment Department, some of our water managers. We have strong and long-standing, and what I describe as robust partnerships. We can usually tell each other what we need to know, not what we want to hear. And I think that certainly applies both ways. And it allows for two-way learning as well, and sharing of knowledge and sharing of experience, particularly looking at developing a seasonal calendar that's aligned with management plans that the Parks Agency are going to adopt or incorporate into their plan of management. So working very closely, but again, as I mentioned at the end of my speech, about us as a traditional owner group maintaining control. And I think that's really important, and so long as your partners are aware of that, it works well. But and also resourcing. You need the resources to have a plan of management is one thing, but to be able to implement it, to be able to do the work that is required to improve the health of the country, it really needs that commitment of resource, both from a dollar point of view, but also a physical employment point of view.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for sharing. Erin, was there anything that you wanted to add in response?
No, I think that was fine. I think that was covered.
Okay, well, thank you. And Pamela, there's a question here for you. Thank you for your beautiful reflections on how you have centered elders. What is your community doing to cultivate the next generation of future elders?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so our community is working on various projects, and we have teachings. Our museum is not just a museum, but a tangible place where we're able to host programs and share our culture and our language in a space with people of all ages. And in that, we're passing on the knowledge and the language which is inherent in us to those that are participating and those that want to learn. And we have about 20 years before our last elders who lived 100% on the land are going to be with us. And it's a crucial time for us to ensure that we have programs and opportunities for our people to continue the dialogue and learning amongst those knowledge holders, and to really ensure that we're attaining as much as we can. So through programs is a really key aspect of that.
Thank you so much. Those programs are so important for our young people. And Shaw, we have a question here for you as well. It's quite long, so I'm hoping that it says, thank you for the beautiful narrative of your homewards journey. Oh my. I found your descriptions of your grandfather's house, your father's meeting house, the road, your father's trees to be fascinating. What are your thoughts on thinking through heritage as the weaving together of stories and meanings for people and communities, rather than in universal definitions of physical or landscape features or static criteria of authenticity? It's a biggie.
That's a big question.
You have 2 minutes.
My goodness. Okay, I can do this.
I'm just
I think yes, I've definitely encountered some interesting things when I do discuss what I consider to be the important things back home. But what I've noticed is as more and more Indigenous people make their way into these fields, the weaving together of stories, the understanding that for a lot of us, our histories, our oral histories, we were not initially a literary people. As more people come into this, as more people are looking at decolonization of different fields, such as this, it becomes a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but the transition into understanding that you can't have just a static definition. There is no, when you say universal definitions of things, ultimately that definition is still going to be rooted in some form of Western thought. And it doesn't necessarily work across the board for everyone. And so I'm excited to see more Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, Indigenous people getting into the field so that when we do talk about what matters in our cultures, in our histories, we're discussing it and we're studying it from a completely different point of view and showing others what it means. I mean, yes, I realize those trees may not mean as much to everyone as they do to me, but for someone from that village, for someone who knows those stories, those trees do have a lot of significance. And to be able to show that these aren't just some trees growing by the side of the road, that's important. And it's important to knowing the history of that hamlet, the history of that state, the people who live on that land. And so hopefully that kind of made sense, but I'm excited to see more and more Indigenous people getting into these fields because it's a different perspective that is very much needed.
Absolutely, and you did make sense. And you know, I think a lot of you, not a lot of you, folks here we've highlighted the importance of having Indigenous, not just like representation, but leading that work and having that voice at the forefront of it. And so I appreciate you sharing and answering to that question. And then here we have for Makari and Xavier. Thank you for sharing your Indigi-centered approaches. You spoke of engaging with this approach with heritage professionals. What are some of the challenges you have encountered when working with mainstream heritage professionals? Is everyone accepting, or is there any significant pushback?
Depends on the group that you're dealing with. Sometimes their age bracket, because some are real time capsules. There's all sorts of challenges that come up. There's gender bias, there's outright racism, there's trying to get those who are pushing back on interfacing with our kaitiaki or our cultural monitors or our people that are at the coalface, trying to get them to see the worth in interfacing in ways that are culturally appropriate and ways that interface with our people and share information in the modes they're most comfortable with and that they know. So basically getting away from the generation of salvaging information, getting away from growing the grey literature of these mountains of reports and documents, and getting them to speak to our people, talk to them, create short versions, create images and artwork, and to convey information in a manner that they can just disseminate that through their networks. Look, there are lots of challenges. There's the challenges of working with non-natives, and now we're seeing the rise of addressing, you know, the development. Archaeology is basically a response to the development agenda. Heritage protection is reactive. It puts our people in a reactive mode most of the time. So we're trying to move away from that into more proactive kaitiaki or Māori-centric modes of addressing that, and trying to get people to see that our people don't want to be siloed and participate in only one sphere. They want a broad spectrum and to want to work across the board. Aroha mai, Xavier, do you have any further things to add to that?
That's cool.
Yeah. Big challenge at the moment that we're facing is we don't have people in our own mainstream tertiary sectors, and we need more workshops at the coalface with our people. So our people delivering to our people. And it's probably on one hand, you can count the amount of our people in specific fields delivering university courses. We need change. We need to create more catalysts in different sectors.
Yeah, the difficulty is we participate in the heritage practice currently, but we need to redefine what the categories of heritage professions are and how the various disciplines, including academic disciplines, their discourses to an Indigenous perspective, so that we can actually take it from there, from first principles, and work out Indigenous agendas and Indigenous aspirations for their whole territories through the whole heritage professional practice.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? That would be a whole other 3-hour conversation that we could have together. I could listen to you two share all day. So, well, Lalin, for sharing your perspectives and responses to those questions. It's so vital that we have Indigenous peoples within those spaces. And so it's 10:30, well, my time and other people's times who are here. And so that concludes this discussion that we've been having. And I just want to take time to say, Nsinogama, all my relations, thank you so much for your sharing the work that you're doing. It is so vital and important to our peoples all around the world. And it's very heartwarming to know that even when we're so far apart, we still have those similarities and connections and what we value in our cultures and our languages in the land. And so in Mi'kmaq, we don't have a word for goodbye. It's I'll see you again. And so maybe not today, but one day we will meet again, and I look forward to that. And so thank you once again from ICMOS and Archipel Research and Consulting for joining us here today. And with that, I think we can finish. I don't know if the recording stops, if what's happening, but yes, thank you.
Recording stops. Thank you, everybody.